A woman goes missing on her way to pick up her young son.
This Herald and Review newspaper employee is missing. Today, police have more questions than answers.
The vehicle was running, the door was open, and no one was around the vehicle.
Garbage bags containing her body parts are found floating in a lake. Investigators scour for clues to a grisly murder only forensic science can solve.
You're not necessarily going to get blood squirting everywhere. And it's plausible that she may have been frozen before she was dismembered.
Cutting-edge forensics turn the case around.
And the DNA profiles from one of those dogs was consistent with the profile we saw in the evidence here.
It's a tragedy and a mystery.
It has sex, it has drugs, it has lies, betrayal, family, violence. It has all of that stuff. It's a classic whodunit.
A 3-year investigation finally uncovers a shocking plot that kills a 23-year-old mother and leaves a little boy alone. Decatur, Illinois is in the heartland of America. It's a dirty little city south of Chicago that's barely changed since the 1930s. Riddled with factories and surrounded by soy fields, it's the kind of place many young people want to escape. People like Karyn Slover. Karyn is 23, already divorced, with a 3-year-old son, Colton. And she has long held a dream to be a model. A dream that would get her out of Decatur for good. Marcus Rogers is a local journalist.
And so now you have this beautiful young lady who everyone's saying you should be a model. You have this vivacious, beautiful woman who's actually trying to achieve a life dream of becoming the next big supermodel. And she wanted to put that and her family first.
On the morning of Friday, September 27, 1996, a modeling agency in Georgia gives her the big break, a chance to leave Decatur. At 5 p.m. that same day, Karyn leaves her job at the local newspaper, excited at the prospect of leaving her old life behind. She tells colleagues that she's on her way to pick up her son, who's staying with her ex-husband's parents. They own a junk lot on the other side of town. 5 hours later, a sheriff finds Karyn's car abandoned. Mike Beck is a detective assigned to the case.
Well, when the car was found, the car was running. The driver's door was open. Her purse was in the car. The belongings were dumped and were in disarray inside the vehicle. And police initially weren't exactly sure what had happened to Karyn since the car was running and she was nowhere to be found at that time.
Police determined that the car belongs to Karyn's boyfriend, David Swan. The car is miles from the newspaper and nowhere near the pickup location for Karyn's son, Colton. Police spend the next 24 hours looking for any sign of the missing woman. The search area spans 3 counties. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Police have been searching the area by foot and by air and are interviewing anyone that may have any information regarding Slover or her disappearance.
Police find nothing. Karyn has completely vanished. The next day, Karyn Slover is declared missing. Colleagues and friends put posters up all over Decatur. The newspaper offers a $10,000 reward. there is a growing belief that she has been kidnapped.
If anybody has any information,
Her boyfriend makes a plea for Karyn to be returned safely.
tips. Just leave us the information where she can be found. Just don't hurt her, because there's a lot of us that love her.
The car Slover was driving was found on the westbound side of Interstate
2 days after her disappearance, a garbage bag washes up on the shore of a nearby lake.
The mystery behind her disappearance ended Sunday afternoon when a couple fished trash bags out of Lake Shelbyville in Moultrie County. Trash bags that contained the dismembered remains of Karyn Slover.
Sheriff Jeff Thomas is summoned to the scene.
When I opened up the bag, it's rather shocking. The first thing I saw was an ear, so I realized it in fact was a human head. I didn't open the bag any further. I had to cut into the bag. I didn't want to disturb the knots to possibly destroy any evidence or the tape that was on the bag. Whoever committed this crime was a very dangerous and vicious person to dismember a body and try and dispose of it in the manner in which it was disposed of. It shows to me someone that's very callous, or someone who is confident in thinking that they could dismember a body and avoid apprehension.
The lake is cordoned off as police search for more human remains. Over the course of the day, Thomas and his team recover more bags containing hands, an abdomen, feet, a thigh, and an arm.
Yeah, got another body part.
Today, a search of the lake by boat turned up more trash bags with more body parts.
The trail leads Sheriff Thomas to the Findlay Bridge. Is this where the killer disposed of the bags? The sheriff's hunch is right. A blood smear is found on the rail.
The Findlay Bridge is located in a rather isolated part of the border of Shelby and Moultrie County. At the time of night in which these may have been thrown, and it's purely speculation, there may be a span of 20, 30, 40 minutes where there's no vehicle on this bridge. This is, again, a very remote area.
CSIs determined that the blood from the bridge is Karyn Slover's. Lynn and David Reed own the town funeral parlor. They're also the local coroners.
Okay, we had a white female, approximately 20 to 25 years old. The head had been severed from the body. It was placed in a plastic bag.
It's the killer's first mistake.
By double bagging them, they basically created a sealed environment, the bag being like a rubber ball now, or a sealed container. And as the body decomposes, it's very well known that it creates a gas. And the gas filled up the bag, and that's what brought it to the surface.
Yeah, got another body part here.
Dental records confirm the body belongs to Karyn Slover. Who would take the life of a promising, popular 23-year-old mom? Decatur, Illinois is rocked by the murder of Karyn Slover, a murder which has left a 3-year-old boy without a mother. Investigators have no idea if they're up against a killer who may strike again. The investigation begins with an autopsy of Karyn's remains. The pathologists discover that Karyn was shot execution style, 7 times in the head, once in the back, and 6 times in the front. It's what forensic profilers call overkill.
We realized that it was a violent death, that there was a lot of rage, a lot of anger that we felt was involved in this death, not only with the appearance of multiple gunshot wounds, but also the severing of the head from the body.
Karyn's jaw and neck are hacked beyond recognition. Her hands have been cut off. Her torso has been sawed in 2. The Reeds also determined that Karyn was not sexually assaulted. Pathologist Kathy Reichs believes Karyn may have known her killer.
The pattern of dismemberment in the Karyn Slover case suggested to me that this was done for body disposal. I didn't see any evidence of true sexual sadism or any motivation beyond simply packaging up that body and getting it out and dropping it into the lake.
The forensics lab runs ballistic tests. The .22 caliber bullets are all from the same gun. Not a useful lead. .22s are the most common household firearm in the United States. The investigation progresses, and police learn that Karyn had a dark side.
Karyn was somebody who dabbled in drugs. She dabbled in sex. She dabbled on a lot of the seedy things of life. She wanted to get rid of the things that she was involved in, specifically cocaine, alcohol, the wrong type of guy. She always had a history of being with the wrong type of guy, and she wanted to change all that.
All the more reason for Karyn to want to take Colton away from Decatur. Karyn's troubled past leads Detective Beck to 3 main suspects. He brings them in for polygraph testing. The first is Brian Maxey, an old boyfriend.
When did you last see Karyn Slover?
2 months ago.
Where were you on the night of September 27th?
I was at a bar.
Did you beat her?
No.
Maxey passes the lie detector test. The second suspect is Michael Slover Jr., Karyn's ex-husband, and father of her son, Colton.
So when last did you see your ex-wife?
Last week.
You guys get along?
She's my ex, isn't she?
Answer the question.
I guess.
Where were you September 27th?
Work.
Michael has a solid alibi. At the time Karyn went missing, he was on his way to work and stopped to check out a car accident. He hit on the female police officer at the scene.
Can I wait here with you?
I don't think so.
No. Do you know what time it is?
She remembered him all too well.
What time you get up?
Then Michael worked his night job at a local bar. His story checks out.
You got like some 50s on the back? Real fine ones?
Nice.
His test reveals nothing.
It's a simple test. I'm going to ask you 4 or 5 questions. Answer them completely and honestly.
The final suspect is David Swan, Karyn's boyfriend.
Where were you on the night of September 27th?
On my couch watching TV.
What David did was, the police felt like he really tried to interject himself in the investigation. He was on TV, he'd granted interviews.
What we're asking is if anybody has any information, I don't care, you call 423-TIPS. Just leave us the information where she can be found.
He was involved in a relationship with her, and what police determined was the relationship that he described to us didn't seem to be the same relationship that we heard about from co-workers.
Swan may not have wanted Karyn to leave town, but Swan also passes his polygraph. Of the 3 suspects, police dismiss 2, Maxey and Michael Slover, but they retain an interest in the 3rd.
Did you kill Karyn Slover?
No. David Swan.
When last did you see her alive?
Swan's alibi is not airtight.
David Swan's alibi was that he was going to be the best man in a wedding on September 28th. And on September 27th, there was a rehearsal dinner. We believed David Swan had approximately 40 to 45 minutes to complete the crime, to kill Karyn and get back to the wedding rehearsal without being noticeably missing.
Sheriff Thomas also suspects Swan.
He was on TV pleading for some type of closure to this case.
My prayer is whoever did this will be caught, and that they'll pay the price for what they did for taking such a wonderful person.
Police now turn to CSIs for help. They scour Karyn's car for clues.
One of the things that was missing from Karyn's car was her cell phone, and the cell phone was never discovered. The fact that her purse was there, we didn't think the motive at that time was robbery. They also found a bag from Hardee's and a partially eaten candy bar, and they were able to lift some fingerprints from that Hardee's bag.
The prints belong to a kid at a fast food joint. There are no other prints anywhere. The killer wiped down the car. The search for clues has come up empty. The last hope lies with the garbage bags containing Karyn's body parts. Suzanne Kidd is a forensic scientist with the Illinois Police.
A lot of the evidence came from the trash bags in which the body was discovered in. There were several trash bags, I believe there were 8 of them, and the debris from the bags came to me, including the clothing that she had been wearing at the time.
The bags contain chunks of concrete the killer used to sink the body parts, and blonde hairs, and pieces of grass.
So initially I looked at the evidence and focused mainly on the hairs and what hairs were present, whether they were human, whether they were animal, and then tried to determine if they were human, what race they were.
Further analysis reveals hairs that are not human. Kidd is certain they are canine. Did the killer own a dog? Joy Halverson is an expert in the specialized field of dog DNA profiling.
Finding animal hair as trace evidence is pretty common, as you can imagine, if you've ever owned a pet. However, it tended to have very practical applications like parentage testing, like animal breeding, and so on, and it wasn't used in a forensic setting.
Kidd submits the hairs with other unusable evidence and moves on. The CSIs have found nothing to further the case. For Detective Beck, it's back to square one.
The search for Karyn Slover's killer took police to the home of someone Slover knew very well, her boyfriend, David Swan.
Police get a warrant for David Swan's house, hoping to find a murder weapon, and maybe even the crime scene. The case has become a personal obsession for Beck.
I think the reason that this crime had such an impact on officers was the fact that Karyn was a young mother, she had a young child, things seemed to be going well for her, and the fact that a lot of officers could see themselves in this position, having children of their own, and just wanted to bring this case to a conclusion because Karyn seemed to be like the girl next door, and it was such a brutal crime.
Police find nothing at Swan's. With no forward progress, the investigation changes direction. Karyn's last known destination was the junkyard owned by her ex-husband's parents. What's the grandparents' story on the day of Karyn's murder? Is there more to the Slovers than anyone has suspected? People in southern Illinois either like or loathe the stubborn Slovers.
The Slover family was, and still is to many people, very mysterious. Depending on who you ask with the Slovers, they were very nice people. And from all outward appearances, the Slovers were very nice. But the truth is that they really weren't. They were, at times, very mean to people, belligerent, condescending to people. They had this aura about them that, damn the rest of them, we're gonna do what we want.
Their car lot is more like a junkyard filled with rusting cars. An eyesore that drives the neighbors crazy. The messy yard gives Detective Beck a new and curious lead.
Shortly after Karyn's murder, we were told by witnesses that Michael Jr. and Michael Sr. were outside with weed eaters. They were cleaning the property. They were also burning debris in a burn pile, and we thought that to be unusual.
Police get a search warrant.
And the Slovers appeared cooperative. While police were searching their house, the Slovers drove over to their business a few miles away and unlocked all the doors under the supervision of a county deputy. The search began at 2 p.m. Some of the crime scene investigators inventoried the property, taking vehicle ID numbers, and others searched inside the garage. All the material will be taken to the crime lab in Springfield.
They find a chainsaw and send it to the lab for analysis.
Okay.
Proving it's the murder weapon would be the investigation's first big break. Pathologist Kathy Reichs is an expert at tool marks on bone.
One of the ways you can determine the type of pattern you're looking at is by experience. You've seen them before. You've seen what a radial saw does. You've seen what a chainsaw does. And so we do have some standards we can go to that tell us what are the characteristic kinds of patterns you're going to see with a radial saw or a hand saw or all these different categories of tools.
But what possible motive could the Slovers have for killing the mother of their grandson? CSI Suzanne Kidd can find no blood on the saw.
We're looking for anything. Unfortunately, we didn't come up with a whole lot.
The Slover chainsaw is not the murder weapon.
The investigators had found a suspect saw. What I might have been able to do is experimentally create marks in bone and then compare those experimental cuts to the actual cuts on Karyn Slover's bones to see if I can find any very, very minute details that could indicate it was exactly a specific saw. And they never found the saw.
The CSIs now turn to the hair found in the garbage bags. It's time to try to match them to the Slovers or another suspect. Beck has not forgotten about David Swan.
And when last did you see Karyn alive?
He is brought back for another interview.
That afternoon.
He now has an alibi, an unforgettable wedding outfit, and a need for cash.
He told us that he recalled he had gone to an ATM machine and made a withdrawal of cash prior to going to the rehearsal dinner. David Swan was wearing an unusually loud shirt that evening, and what police did was we went to this ATM and actually retrieved the videotape of David Swan retrieving money wearing this shirt, and it was right in the middle of the 40-minute time frame. And once we identified David Swan during that 40-minute time frame, we knew he couldn't have been responsible for this crime.
The prime suspect is finally out of the picture. Now focus intensifies on the Slovers.
Michael Slover Sr.'s alibi during the weekend that Karyn Slover was missing was he worked at the Clinton Power Station, and he told police that he was either at the Clinton Power Station or he was at Miracle Motors. Jeanette Slover really never provided police with an alibi other than say she was at home.
Jeanette Slover had a motive. She was fiercely attached to her grandson, Colton, and she hated Karyn. Jeanette Slover did not want Colton to move away with his modeling mother.
She was very possessive of Colton. She had a history of long fights with Karyn, a long history of fights with Karyn, Jeanette had, and some really bitter ones and nasty ones, and there was a lot of mean things. She's a very possessive person. She scares me. Jeanette Slover scares me.
Investigators get another warrant, this time for the Slovers' house.
At 9 a.m., police arrived to serve the search warrants. Neighbors said they'd been here before, about a month after the murder.
They came in a big truck and all busted out like maniacs with guns. And next thing I know, they're beating down the door.
Police began their first search at the Slover residence in Mount Zion. Investigators and crime lab technicians conducted an extensive search of the house and grounds.
Mike, I think we hit the jackpot.
Can we get a picture of this gun over here?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
They confiscate Michael Sr.'s large gun collection. CSIs use the chemical agent luminol to scour for bloodstains. Again, nothing.
Everywhere we search for a crime scene, we also search for a murder weapon. However, we were never able to locate one.
Yeah, try to make it as painless as possible. Just hold still, please.
Jeanette and Michael Sr. give hair and blood samples.
Good.
Forensic science may prove that the Slover hair is similar to that found with Karyn's remains. Then, yet another return to the car lot.
Just before 9 this morning, police returned to this Mount Zion location, a business owned by Michael Slover Sr.
The reason we went back to Miracle Motors was when Karyn's car was found on Interstate 72, there were some things inside the car that we thought were unusual. And one of the things in the driver's floorboard were cinders. And also when Karyn's body was discovered, there were some grasses that were identified inside the plastic bags. We were able to determine that Miracle Motors had a gravel base parking lot. And we believe that the cinders from the floorboard of the car could possibly have come from Miracle Motors.
Suzanne Kidd reviews the evidence from the search of the junkyard. CSIs can find no blood. It doesn't surprise her.
You're not necessarily going to get blood squirting everywhere. And it's plausible that she may have been frozen before she was dismembered.
A dismemberment scene might not be as bloody as someone might picture in their mind, because if the body is dead and the heart is no longer pumping, there's not going to be a lot of bleeding going on.
The ballistics tests at the lab don't link Michael Sr.'s guns to the bullets pulled from Karyn's skull. The Slover's hair doesn't match either.
There was a lot of sense that the investigation had stalled and we're not getting anywhere. They felt like they were going in the right direction, but they didn't have any physical evidence to support that.
After 8 months, there are no answers. A 3-year-old boy has no mother, and the life of a beautiful young woman has been extinguished. The case is now cold. It is time for a new approach, and a new cop is brought in to make it happen. Traditional police work and cutting-edge forensics have failed to crack the Karyn Slover murder case. A tough Irish cop is called in to see if he can turn things around. His name is Mike Manx.
The case kind of got a little cold, I would say, about this time. And then when I was appointed that, I got together immediately with all the guys that were involved in the case, the task force, hashing out things, and everything new come up that we felt could help us in our investigation. My philosophy at that time was, hey, try it. What do we have to lose? I mean, you got to start someplace with this new stuff.
Mannix attacks the investigation with the latest that forensic science has to offer. He starts at the beginning with Karyn's remains.
So you found all the body parts in the lake, everything.
Mannix gets permission to exhume her body. He calls in renowned pathologist Kathy Reichs to find clues that may have been overlooked.
Anytime you do an exhumation, there's always a big question mark about what you're going to find. In this case, the victim had been murdered, she had been dismembered, she had been thrown in a lake, she had then been recovered, she had then been autopsied, she had been buried, and we were now digging her up some 10 months later.
Reichs confirms that Karyn Slover had been dismembered by a chainsaw.
After I stripped off the tissue and got a real close look under magnification at the damage to the bone, I saw there was a lot of chipping, a lot of flaking, a lot of splintering on the ends of the long bones. A tremendous amount of energy transfer had taken place to those bones.
And there is another clue.
Her body was dismembered with her clothing on, so her clothing was torn and it was cut apart. And what became important were the fasteners involved in the clothing. The jeans that she had on were the button-fly jean type that was popular back then. And the blouse that she had on had cloth-covered buttons, at least at the sleeve area that we know of.
Mannix seeks to find buttons matching Karyn's clothing at the Slovers' junkyard. There's another lead. Phone records on the weekend of Karyn's murder show that Michael Jr. got a lot of calls from Mom and Dad.
What we learned during the investigation was that there was an unusual amount of phone calls between those individuals.
Over 18 phone calls were made between the Slover parents and their son. It's unusual, but hardly incriminating. But for Manx, this is enough proof to get a third search warrant for the car lot. Manx attacks the car lot like an archaeological dig, with very specific instructions for the CSIs.
We decide we grid off certain areas. We have officers assigned to work these certain areas. And then we got the buckets, and as we collected each bucket, it's properly marked with the grid system that we had so we could identify the bucket, because we had no idea if anything was going to be found when we did that. So for the next 3 days, we get off at dusk and start at dawn, and then that's we ended up when we left with the 60 buckets.
He focuses his attention on the burn pile. If he's right, tiny traces of Karyn Slover may be hidden among the ashes.
Burning and crushing and using wood chippers or whatever makes our job harder, but there's always going to be something left behind. There's always going to be that little bit of forensic evidence that we're going to be able to get some information from.
Manx remembers the dog hairs found on the garbage bag containing Karyn's remains.
So I went and got brand new grooming brushes, and I groomed the dogs and placed the dog hairs in evidence. And I said, well, you know, them dogs may come into play.
Manx sends the Slover dog hairs to Joy Halverson, a dog DNA expert. He asks her to compare them with the hairs found with Karyn Slover's remains.
The analysis of the animal samples is done with the same kinds of genetic markers that are used in people. Almost every dog, you can say, is genetically unique, and it basically have an individual barcode that marks that animal, and every sample that you take from that animal, whether it'll be hair or blood or tissue or saliva, will have that barcode that you can associate with it.
Halverson gets to work. It's a long shot, but so far the only shot Manx has. He begins to build a theory about the crime. Manx thinks Karyn's murder is a plot that took at least 3 people to carry it through. One does the shooting. Another ditches the car. Yet another cuts Karyn to pieces and then dumps her remains. Now Manx needs to prove he's right. After 2 weeks of searching the car lot, the evidence Manx has been looking for,
You got a bag?
a rivet from a pair of jeans, and a cloth-covered button. Manx calls Suzanne Kidd.
I thought this again would be one of those fishing expeditions that came up empty, but the buttons in this case, the buttons and rivets were great. There was a sense of satisfaction when you looked at those and you looked at the clothing from Karyn's, that Karyn was wearing, and you were able to compare them to each other and find that they were consistent, that they did match.
Which tells us that obviously this is the crime scene where Karyn was killed in Mount Zion at the car lot.
Manx is now certain the Slovers killed their daughter-in-law. But is the forensic evidence enough to make a case? A year and a half after Karyn's murder, Michael Slover Sr. kills his dog. Mike Manx now has the only dog hair evidence there is. At the crime lab, Suzanne Kidd completes her analysis on the buttons and rivets found at the crime scene. She tells Manx that the manufacturer of Karyn's jeans left a telltale mark.
When you talk about fasteners on clothing, a lot of the manufacturers like to mark things. They want to be able to say, yes, that came from my item that I sell, and they do it to protect themselves. But the fact that they do it helps us, because in the world of forensics, they're differentiating their line of clothes from anybody else's line of clothes.
Manx takes his case to the state, convinced he can prove the Slovers killed their daughter-in-law. District Attorney Jay Scott is skeptical at first.
Obviously, this was a circumstantial case. We had a lot of different circumstantial evidence, the buttons, the rivets, the phone calls, the timing of this, the relationship that she had had with this entire family, which was not very good, the fixation on Colton. It was all circumstantial. We didn't have an eyewitness.
The state holds off. A year passes. Defense attorney Joe Vinieri has a controversial theory about the delay and about the button and rivets.
One has to ask themselves, if there were 2 previous searches, why on a 3rd search does all this incriminating evidence suddenly pop up? So the question that was presented to the jury, and which remains unanswered to this day, is could any human agency, i.e. the police, have had any responsibility or any part in that evidence being basically placed at the scene?
Vinieri's poisonous claim that police planted evidence divides the community on a 3-year-old murder investigation.
Yeah. Rumors are flying, but many discount them.
Just a bunch of crap, you know, is what I call it.
Decatur hums with gossip and rumors. The death of Karyn Slover continues to capture the public's imagination.
There's a lot of hearsay, I think. Everybody's got this opinion, and everybody's got that opinion, so unless you hear it from the authorities, why, you don't pay no attention to it, really.
But rumors and police presence still lend an air of fear to this town.
Very scary. I have a young child, and I worry about her a lot.
This is our OJ. This is our Scott Peterson case. It has sex. It has drugs. It has lies, betrayal, family, violence. It has all of that stuff. You have a dismembered body. It's a classic whodunit. You have no murder weapon. And it's what motion pictures are made out of. And that fed on the appetite of this community.
What was that brand name? It looks like...
Manx still has no murder weapon. He sends divers to the lake where Karyn's remains were discovered, hoping that the killer threw the gun and chainsaw there. After 3 days of searching, they find nothing. Then Manx gets a call from dog DNA expert Joy Halverson.
Initially, I received the 2 hairs from the duct tape. I did the DNA testing on that and got a partial result on 1 hair and no result on the 2nd hair. Then I requested the samples from the dogs themselves, and the DNA profiles from one of those dogs was consistent with the profile we saw in the evidence hair.
The odds are 1 in 56,000 the Slover's dog hair is that on the bag from the lake. The bag that contained Karyn Slover's body. Manx now believes his theory is correct. There isn't just one murderer, there are 3.
First of all, somebody had to drive the abandoned Bonneville. Somebody had to be picked up, so we got 2 people there.
And then the 3rd, Michael Jr., Karyn's ex-husband.
What'd you do to her then? We got one individual who's kind of locked into an alibi, and 2 other people have no alibi. We did time studies on all of this. It was a pretty good indication that we had 3 people involved.
After his parents killed her, Michael Jr. dismembers his ex-wife's body.
Sometime during that weekend, they dismembered her and took her to Lake Shelbyville, probably during darkness, the cover of darkness, and tossed her over the bridge.
Mom kills. Dad cleans up evidence. Son cuts up his ex-wife. Now the state of Illinois is confident that the Irish cop has got a case. In 2002, almost 6 years after the murder of Karyn Slover, the Slover family goes on trial.
My
Michael Slover Jr. and his parents, Michael Sr. and Jeanette Slover, all face 3 counts of first-degree murder in connection with the brutal shooting and dismemberment of 23-year-old Karyn Slover in 1996.
The prosecution's theory was very simple: for love of a child. That the Slovers killed Karyn Slover for possession of Colton, her son. They had found out, the Slovers had found out, that Karyn was going to become a model and move out of state and take her son with them. That enraged the Slovers.
Jay Scott prosecutes against the Slovers. He says the case was a tough one.
As far as the theory of what happened in this case, there is some disagreement. We put a lot of different theories out there. She left work. Where she went and what exactly she did, we don't know. Where she was killed, we don't know. Could have been Miracle Motors. She could have been lured to that lot or got to that lot somehow. We do know that she was dismembered at that location. We know that Michael Jr. went out of his way to have an alibi for that night. And he did things that people wouldn't normally do to try to be seen. He pulled the trigger? Probably not. But that leaves his parents. We know that afterwards, immediately after Karyn came up missing, that Michael Jr. and his father were involved in cleaning up the car lot, which is something that their neighbors had never seen them do.
Joe Vinieri represents Michael Jr.
I know that my client is anxious to get to court and anxious to answer the charges.
He believes that the evidence never added up.
Well, our approach to the fact that they didn't have a crime scene, they didn't have a murder weapon, and the things that you would customarily find in some, perhaps other murder cases, is that they really didn't have a case. And our strategy was to emphasize that throughout the case and to the jury.
Meanwhile, Jeanette Slover's courtroom manners do little for her defense.
Jeanette Slover looks mean. She has eyes of steel. And she would come into that courthouse every single day looking like the Wicked Witch of the East.
Vinieri says that after years of looking, no wonder police found things.
Lo and behold, after they know what they're looking for, they search the car lot, and lo and behold, they come up with a button that ostensibly matched that button on her sleeve. So when I say those things, I'm not saying those things, I'm not saying them lightly, I'm not saying it cavalierly.
A cop's theory with no eyewitnesses. No one will ever know for sure.
We never found the gun. We also never found the instrument used to dismember Karyn. We, to this day, don't know for a certainty where she was killed.
After years of forensic investigation and just 2 days of deliberation, the jury returns with a verdict. All 3 Slovers are convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison.
I wish I could explain what happened. When the verdict came back, I felt like the earth had shook, is exactly how it felt.
The Slovers are now appealing their conviction. For the investigators, it marks the end of a long, baffling journey.
For me personally, I hope it's the biggest case I'm ever involved in. I hope it's the only murder investigation I'm ever involved in. I have a daughter approximately her age. It struck me very hard those first few weeks because of the age of my daughter being the same age as Karyn. It was very disturbing to see what these people were capable of doing to their daughter-in-law, and it will remain with me for the rest of my life. I can't pass Miracle Motors car lot or drive on the Finley Bridge and not think about the days that we investigated Karyn Slover's death.
I'm often asked why it is I do what I do, why work with the dead. And I do. I work with the dead, but I think of what I do as working for the living. I'm working for those families, for Karyn Slover's son, for example. I'm working for the justice system to be able to go into court, testify, and hopefully bring people like Karyn Slover the justice they deserve.
Colton Slover grows up knowing that his mother was violently murdered and that his father is serving life in prison for the crime.